Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode where I'm going to be interviewing the two collaborators behind an incredible new project called The Oracle in honor of 30 years to Gimel Tammuz. So I'm sitting here today. I'd like to welcome Rabbi Dovid Zaklikowski and his wife.
Good.
I've worked with Rabbi Zaklikowski on many projects together. It's an honor to work with him, both for Base Rivka Project, Embrace, and now with this latest project, the Oracle. Rabbi Zaklikowski is an archivist, a researcher, a biographer, and he has published over 40 books in Jewish history and thought, has written for numerous newspapers, including the Jewish Exponent, Baltimore Jewish News, and New Jersey Jewish News. So welcome to both of
Thank
you.
you.
I'm also here today with a photographer, and that's the collab that we're going to be discussing, Marc Asnin, who I got to meet personally because my photograph is featured in this book. And he's a documentary photographer. His work has appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, Time, Reader's Digest, and Newsweek. And his work is going to be the subject of tonight's interview. He taught photography at the School of Visual Arts, and his images are in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art and the Museum of the City of New York. So welcome, Marc.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So many of you are familiar with the iconic picture that Marc photographed in the year 1992 in honor of the Rebbe's 90th birthday. It's an iconic photograph that was splashed across the New York Times front cover. And actually, my husband's grandfather, Rabbi Asnin, is in it. You know, you see him very intently. It's a beautiful picture, a work of art. And we're going to be discussing this picture, the Rebbe, the Hasidim, and this book tonight. So looking forward to this conversation. Welcome. So I'd love if Rabbi and Mrs. Zaklikowski, if you could start. How do you know Marc?
So I met Marc at the Knesset of Shluchim. It's been probably 18 years ago. And he basically asked me to assist him with photographing his uncle Charlie, which he was working on a book on, who never had bar mitzvah. And we were going to have his first time put on tefillin on, and he would be bar mitzvah in 770. And that's where our relationship grew. I guess the first time he took the picture, as Marc is let's say, very much wants his picture the way he wants it. And he didn't like the way the pictures came out the first time, so we did it again. And he basically took over the room, the small room in 770, and we photographed the picture again. And at that point, he realized that he has to thank me. So he gave me that picture, which he gave you too. But it was pretty shocking to see such imagery, which I love imagery of the Rebbe. And obviously, I run the Lubavitch archives for many years, which is the largest digital archive for Lubavitch photos, and with plenty of pictures of the Rebbe. You know what I mean? As you say, like, you know, tens of thousands, and just never ends the amount of pictures we have. This was like so shocking to see the intimacy between the Rebbe and Chassidim that you don't see in other photos. And that was, you know what I mean, took me, and I tried to explain that to Marc, but Marc didn't really understand. Like, you know, he understands his photos, but I don't think that he understood that I've never seen such photos before, or never had that experience to see that devotion between Chassidim and Rebbe, which we speak about, but all of a sudden you're seeing it here with your eyes. Yeah, and then our relationship grew. Like Marc wants to, you know what I mean? I'm sure he has what to say how that happened more than.
Yeah, well, I'll ask you. So how do you meet Rabbi Zaklikowski? What was the whole experience like for you?
So, I mean, many years ago, after my making the images for the article, The Oracle of Crown Heights, I had always sort of stayed in touch, and I was attracted to Chabad for many reasons. But sadly, after the massacre in Mumbai, I decided that I was going to do a project about the shluchim, the emissaries, And the way I sort of remember is meeting Dovid at Chabad.org. And one of the things, it's true, he set up that possibility for my uncle to have his bar mitzvah, because my uncle's bar mitzvah was part of a scam and he never had it. And for my uncle, that was a great moment. So, and that's true, Dovid talks about me taking over 770, but 770 also permitted that. It's a special place, and that wouldn't have happened anywhere else. But I think early on, my attraction to Dovid was that he was someone who had a visual sensibility, and he understood what it was like to tell a story. And that's not something to take for granted in the bigger world that I function in. But also, I think, especially in the Chabad world, Dovid's unique in that he understands photography, similar to a photo editor. Like, he has a great understanding. So that was an attraction to him, I think, in the beginning, because that's not, I would say, something, and not in a negative, but that's not something that's learned in Crown Heights. Like, I think that's something special about Dovid, and that was an attraction. And that Dovid made my uncle's ability to have that special moment, was something I appreciated. And I knew that was an extension of what the Rebbe had left, but Dovid still came through. And, over time, instead of just being colleagues, we became buddies and, the closest of friends.
Wow. So I just want to backtrack for 1 second. When you published the original picture of the Rebbe in the New York Times, it was called The Oracle then?
It was called The Oracle of Crown Heights, yes. And it
So
was
this book is named after, like, that as an extension of that picture.
Yeah, I think I think, and I wasn't in the meetings when they decided the title of the story, but it was more specific. I think they saw Chabad and, Lubavitch, the world headquarters is in Brooklyn. I would think this book is more, in the interviews and the people who were touched either directly or indirectly, it's a worldwide. So I think that's why it's not, Dovid could give you his thoughts, but that's not why it's a specific place. He's just the Oracle,
The
because
New York Times editors chose the picture of the Oracle, the title, it was they did it.
yeah, as a photographer, like, I made all the images and they chose Kathy Ryan, who was the director of photography, chose those images with, I'm sure, in an editorial meeting with the editor-in-chief and the design director.
Wow. I'm going to try to share this picture so that we can see what we're talking about. Share screen. It's that picture.
Yes, it's that picture. And David I think it was on the fourth. It was in 1992 on the Yitzhak of the Rebbitzin, the Rebbe's wife. Yeah, and it was an incredible moment, and of course, over the years the pictures meant different things. And for David, how he articulately expressed, that connection between the Rebbe and his Hasidim, you know, that's not something, that's not how I would articulate it, but that is a beautiful, way of articulating it. I mean, for me, it's just this man and this incredible passion, and, I mean, I was there and I made the picture and I had the skill set, but that's picture's all about what that, the subject, meaning the Rebbe, and the people that believed in him and were feeling, I think, that unconditional love. That's who made that picture. I mean, I recorded it, and that's in many pictures, but there's an incredible energy that I felt in the room in 770, and I think that picture captures it, an incredible devotion. But recently, talking about it with someone else, I think that picture for me, now, this is not what I thought 30 years ago or maybe 10 days ago, is like those men around him, those young boys under the table. I mean, that really sums up to me the Rebbe's connection to every Jew in the world,
Wow.
and the Rebbe spread. So that may, it's like a metaphor for what the Rebbe did. I think the Rebbe, a few hundred years from now, when people look back, they won't think they're, and I'm not talking in a religious, concept, but there was nothing orthodox about an immigrant who came to a new country and how he embraced and changed Judaism. I think that picture, that shows the energy that we still feel 30 years ago.
Wow. Can you just translate the word oracle for us? What does oracle mean?
So the oracle, which was chosen by the editors of the New York Times Magazine together with the writer, Michael Spector. So when they chose it, it was someone who people look up to for guidance, people look up to for what they should do in their daily life, and also seeing that person as being a godly person, someone who had a relationship with Hashem that not necessarily every single person had. So when I was working on the book, basically, because of the way I saw when looking through Marc's images, was this intimacy with those who came in contact with him, which I personally experienced with the Rebbe himself. Even though I was young, I had you felt this personal relationship with the Rebbe, this personal connection of him looking in your eyes and you're looking back in his eyes, even if it's for those split seconds. I was trying to understand why that relationship happened. How did that occur? What is that relationship? What does it mean to people today? So we take Joel Lieberman, for example, Senator Lieberman, who's featured in the book. I very much want to understand why him as a student in 1967, what was that connection that he had with the Rebbe? How did that happen? And how did that develop to the way it was many, many years later and until today, that he found inspiration in the Rebbe and his teachings? So that was very much a part of my understanding. And when we were doing the interviews, try to delve deeper into people's feelings, not just the stories, which they're all there, and some fascinating stories and connection with the Rebbe, but also to understand that connection, to understand where did it come from in themselves and from outside of themselves.
So what's your goal for the book, though? Like, what do you want the reader to see and read?
To me, right. So to me, really, and I take it very seriously. And I would say that perhaps that is my relationship with Marc. Could have not happened if I would have been, I always say, thank God I come from a very long Hasidic dynasty. It's not important right now. My great grandfather was, the gabbai of a great Rebbe, and for some reason we landed in that great Rebbe. Actually told my grandfather to land in Chabad. And I said, thank God that I landed in Chabad, because my relationship with Marc is only possible because of the way the Rebbe taught us, or the way the Rebbe reacted to people like Joel Lieberman. What does that mean? That means that as a person, as the way I'm inbred in me is very judgmental of people, very much very much want to be critical of the other person. The same way I treat my writing, very critical and very judgmental about it. I feel that about people, and it's a constant struggle. I've been struggling this for all my time, but I'm learning from the way the Rebbe dealt with people, which ultimately brought these people to listen to want to be a part of the Chassidim. That ultimately is how I could have a relationship like with Marc, which we are, to say different is a mild word. We're in everything about us. We are, there are some similarities. We love art. We love all different kind of ideas, but we are so different from each other, and we like coming on time to meetings. But like I would say that there's such a difference that if it wasn't for the Rebbe, we wouldn't be able to have our relationship that we have to today.
Wow, it's so beautiful. Mark, what surprised you about this project when you were taking pictures? Like, what didn't you expect?
I mean, first I want to say I think I admire Dovid that, someone coming from the secular world, that Dovid understands that, and embracing in this book that not everyone came to the Rebbe, obviously, in the same way. There's some people in the book that were born Hasidic, and there's other people, like I have an essay in the book, and I came in a very different path. And I think that the book and these interviews, that some of them, I participated in, or many I was, present, is that the Rebbe didn't need everyone. He accepted everybody, even though, and now that doesn't mean he capitulated in his deep beliefs, but that he was open to understanding in a new country that if he wanted to get to where spiritually or religiously he wanted Jews to be, he was open-minded and a critical thinker, and he wasn't afraid of that. So I think you get that in the interviews, and that I think is a great respect, to what the Rebbe created, and what he left us 30 years later. So yeah, I mean, these interviews are all deeply emotional, and everyone has a different, path to get there. And, to me, that was what the Rebbe, in my experience, gave to the Jewish world. And that is, I'm not a historian, but just like I'm another Jew and I'm a photographer, and a storyteller, that's pretty unique. Like there's nothing been like that.
Wow. Wow. How
So
did you decide who to photograph and interview?
that was, I mean, I think for me, like, Newt Gingrich, who was Speaker of the House, he, I think, in conversations with Dovid, I thought that was important, and to say the least, Newt Gingrich is not someone I have any political affections for. But I also think Newt Gingrich understood and he deeply got what the Rebbe was, or the movement around the Rebbe, what the Rebbe created. The Rebbe created a movement, and I think Newt Gingrich understood that, and I respect that, even though I don't agree with pretty much anything he agrees with, but I think he didn't have an understanding as a politician. He had an understanding as a historian and as an American, and he crossed aisles and worked with John Lewis, who was an incredible leader of the civil rights movement, and Bill Clinton. So, and then, I think Dovid came up with most of the people, but those were conversations we had. And, I mean, when we interviewed former Attorney General Robert Abrams of New York, at the end of the interview, the Attorney General and I reminisced about people we knew and journalists we knew when I worked at a very, very liberal newspaper called The Village Voice. And I think, like, Robert Abrams had a great respect for that journalism, which was incredibly radical and different and to the left. But he also had a great love and connection to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, knew Robert Abrams was from the liberal part of the Jewish and secular world. And that's, to me, that's incredible that the Rebbe had that love and also insight. And that's what changed the path of Judaism here.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so really the way it began originally was we were going to do interviews of 20 people, and then Mark had his 20, 30 pictures that he loved of the Rebbe. So I was basically choosing those people. They were going to be really mostly Chabad people. I was going to split it as much as possible, be half man, half woman. And then basically Mark started showing up at my office with more and more negatives, and I was flipping out because I'm like, Mark, this is not just great photos. This is like history. Like, it all of a sudden my mind that you're dealing with 2 months before the Rebbe had a stroke, and you have there amazing photos of with the three Sharf or children, like, or orphans, and then you have photos with at Mrs. Lapine's funeral. They're so moving and personal and more. So to me, it was okay, Mark. We need to record also the time. So it was the man, the place, and what was happening at the time. And
So just to clarify, these are interviews of the past or present?
These interviews were over the past 10 years. So we began 10 years ago, pretty much to the date when the book is going to be out. We began doing interviews and photographing the people. So you have Rabbi Saul Friedman, Rebbe Chabad, who are sadly no longer with us and can't see it, can't see the book, but they're a part of this, and they were a part of this from the first day. And other people, Mr. Francis, which Mark followed already in 1992, and we have 16 pages on him and his family, with his son, interviews, which is a fascinating look into the life of a person who was so different than his community, but the Rebbe embraced him. We're not talking about here in the 1950s. We're talking about here, 1989, 90, 91, 92. It's boggling. It's mind-boggling because of, at that point, we know how big Chabad is. At that point, we know how many relationships the Rebbe was involved in and how many hours he's spending standing on Sunday dollars, but he remembers this guy who, basically lost his job and was going through a very difficult time. And the book, he goes at length describing it for, the only time in his life that he's ever spoken to me for the book, which happened on a street on Eastern Parkway, which that sort of thing is many years of me speaking to him and running after him. And that was all a part of this. With Mark's encouragement, I could say that the book wouldn't have come out, including the interviews, if not Mark being there, first of all, willing to jump one day to take portraits of these people, including 6 in the morning, 2 in the morning, on doing Curtis Sliwa. He was there for the interview, and we photographed him at WABC Studios.
Wow.
We were there from 12.
I want to just clarify my question, because you mentioned, let's say, pictures of the Sharf boys from back then. So then you went and interviewed them today?
Correct. We interviewed them and we took portraits of them.
Okay. And you included the old pictures.
Yeah. So for that, there's pictures of them from 92, and then there's new images them as adults and those archival images. So it's a combination of imagery.
How many pictures are old pictures versus like the pictures today?
I didn't calculate it. Like, let's say my essay at the end of the book, which covers some 30, 40 pages, has a large amount of archival photos, but includes, including your photo, with something like 35 photos of, of Chabad, of how Lubavitchers today connect to the Rebbe or make the Rebbe part of their life until today. So it's divided in, around 150, 200 archival, and around 50 to 70, which is current of today. But I haven't counted. Maybe I should. So you have let's say Curtis Leewall, right? You have Curtis Leewall over here. That's his current photo. But then we have Curtis Leewall or the Guardian Angels from archival photos from back then that Mark took in 1992.
So interesting.
Yeah.
So I think something that Dovid brought up is that I think this project in the book, for Dovid, a lot of those images are, they're historically important and they have a different meaning to him. For me, those images are, they're just not historical. I wouldn't know who those people are. And I think that's what's interesting about the book. And I'm very happy that I gave Dovid that archive, because for me, it's not, I'm not a historian, and, the pictures that I'm interested in 20 images, but with Dovid's, love for what he does and for his community, him and I, that only happened as a friendship, and that friendship wouldn't happen without the Rebbe. But I also want to be clear that me giving Dovid those negatives was as a Jew, and like that also was affected by, meeting the Rebbe and feeling differently than I did growing up as a Jew, so.
What do you mean? How did it make you feel differently?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when I walked through the doors of 770, there was definitely like a sense of anxiety, because growing up in South Brooklyn and going to after school Hebrew school, like we were proud Jews and we always identified, but came from a pretty tough neighborhood, and we all identified as Jews, but we weren't, let's say most of our parents were high holiday Jews. And when you went to Hebrew school, they consistently reinforced that we were self-hating and we weren't good. And if you didn't go to Israel, you were really no good. And I think, listen, this is not a secret. I'm just telling you my story, but generations of people, men and women like me, they lost their connection to their spirituality and their connection maybe also religiously. And going through the doors of 770 now 30 years later, the Rebbe and the Rebbe, it's a long time ago, my life was changed spiritually, and my children who were blessed to me years later, we're not religious, but, my daughters have a much deeper sense of mitzvah, and they have a much deeper sense. They love going to Chabad, and, they have a deeper connection. And sometimes, like, my middle daughter's friends would come from high school and they would say, wow, you're really religious. Like every door has a mezuzah and your father keeps his head covered. And my daughter said, no, we're not religious, but my father needs to be the loudest Jew there is. And that's kind of beautiful, because like indirectly she knows the Rebbe said you're proud. What I heard is you stick your chest out, and that's how we'll be a stronger people. So, and 30 years later, I wear a yarmulke, I wear tzutzes, and I do whatever I can do. And, after my bar mitzvah, I told my parents, yeah, I'm never going back. Like, those guys are not okay. And that's a pretty wild trip, and for you and Dovid and like you were born into that. That's the way it is. But for someone like me, or my daughter's, in London studying, and she's taking her friends to, a Jewish holiday at Chabad, and she doesn't agree with plenty of things about Chabad, but she knows she's loved, and that's a pretty, like, I'm telling you, 100 years from now, for forever, people will think like, what a gift he gave us, and he gave Hasidim a certain, what you guys got, but a lot of wandering Jews like myself, you know, who knows, will we healed or what? I'm not, I
Did the
mean,
book
some
give
people,
you a deeper appreciation, even more from when you like from 30 years ago?
I think all those interviews and, things those people said, you know, continued, giving me more information to know, like, wow, like the Rebbe did that or the community did this, but in years earlier when I was met Dovid, I was traveling the world doing a project about the shluchim everywhere. And you can go from Siberia to Cuba, no matter where you go, like you see that unconditional love and how the shluchim on the ground understand, what's going on. And, one time, I met a Rebbitzin and, I thought I was a know-it-all, and I told her she had, like, her son had two twins, two young women who were twins, and they were the babysitter for the Rebbitzin's grandchild, and they had a hard life, abandoned, and they were, babysitters, and they were connected to the Rebbitzin and the family, and I said to the Rebbitzin, yeah, I know the most important thing is that they marry a Jew. And she said in a very strong, very strong way, she said, no, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. And I thought, first, I liked that firmness and in the deep belief in what she was going to say. And she said, no, the most important thing for those two young women is they need to be loved. That's the most important thing. After that, we'll discuss it, but they just need to be loved. They were never loved. Now, you know what? No matter, like, that was her as an individual, but I believe that was the enrichment directly of the Rebbe. And that, I don't care if you're Hasidim, Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, that's that just sums it up. So I think this book it tells 40 stories, and in those 40 stories you get that sense in different ways from different people, and I think it's an appropriate way of remembering the Rebbe, and okay, like I still think I'm a journalist. I'm a Jew first, a dad, maybe I'm a dad first and a Jew second. I don't know. So people can be critical of that, and that's okay. But the third part of me is a storyteller, and I think it's pretty incredible. This is an incredible story. So 100 years from now, I hope that this book is a testament to this man who, and I know I've said it before, but he really did change the trajectory of Jewry. And I also think it's important in every community. And I said this recently at a Kiddush in memory of my mother. We're living in a city now, we're in a country where there's incredible xenophobia. And I'm going to say, I know in Crown Heights, in the Chabad community, there is some of that too. Now, they'll say that I don't know because I don't wear a black hat and I'm not from, and that's fine. And we can agree to disagree. But what I would say is this book is a testament to remember, if people are walking down the street and they see a recent migrant, to stop and say hello. Because this country did the same thing to Jews, and this country turned its back on Jews during the Holocaust. It's still a great country, and I'm proud to be an American, but being a great American is looking at our deficits. So I would hope people would realize that instead of judging those people, they can think, oh, that could have been the Rebbe. That could have been the Rebbe coming to these shores, and he faced anti-Semitism like many Jews. So I think there's things to connect the dots here, and I think the Rebbe wouldn't like and wouldn't respect that judgment of people based on their color of their skin or the religion that they're practicing. But he would say, just not about capitulating being your Jewishness, but I think directly connected to your Jewishness. When you see that migrant, that could have been someone in the Rebbe's family or any of our family coming here 100 years ago, when this country and this city treated us as shamefully as they are today.
I just wanted to add on to what Mark was talking about, that while you're learning about the Rebbe and as you're doing interviews, and I always say to leave my mind open to everything, to learning new things. I shouldn't judge me as a, one of my proudest things to be called from everything is a journalist. I don't think a journalist in a bad way, but it means me removing my own ideas, my own thoughts, and learning things anew and being able to bring out what I learned on a piece of paper for people to appreciate in the most interesting way. So as I'm sitting here doing interviews and, taking in the information, and I'm sitting there with, Mr. Francis on Eastern Parkway and telling me his story, I was like, the reason why the Rebbe, gave him so much love every single time he walked out of shul, gave him encouragement with his hands, asked about him when he wasn't there. To me, it was for sure. Like, I knew the Francis family for many years in yeshiva. We learned together with Gershon and Anon. And I said, oh, he was so different than everyone else in the community. So that everyone was, trying to encourage him. Don't worry, people may see you one way, but I don't see you that way. Okay, so Mr. Francis passed away, and I'm telling his son Anon, hey, your father's a part of this book. And he's like, yeah, but like, how are you portraying him? How are you writing it? I'm telling him, like, listen, like, I thought it was fascinating how the Rebbe, like, embraced him despite him being black, and he's like, Dovid, it's not the story. It's okay, let's go, let's talk. And I interviewed him, and it turns out that the Rebbe, he basically corresponds with the Rebbe. And, if you think about it, during his most, the time the Rebbe was most occupied in his life, the most things are happening that we know about. There was plenty going on, and I know the 50s, 60s, but you could say, listen, he had time to give little small people attention. But here was this guy who basically lost his job and was, crying to the Rebbe in his letters and at dollars, but every single time the Rebbe to give him encouragement to the difficulties that he was going through in his life. That's the reason why he was giving it, making with his hands to him. That's why he was asking about him. So it was, myself have to learn how to see the way the Rebbe saw people so different than him, accepted them for who they were, people who were even, espoused ideas that were totally, the opposite of what he wanted from the world. If it came, let's say, to Alan Dershowitz, to the extreme, criticized the Rebbe in thousands of, newspapers, in his syndicated column against the Hanukkah menorah, which surely landed on the Rebbe's desk. And in his book, one of his most famous books, Chutzpah, basically attacked Chabad, straight on, like as if, like, you know what I mean, and wished things for them that were, the exact opposite of what Chabad was trying to do. The Rebbe still embraced him, responded to his questions respectfully, didn't attack him. It's something that I need to learn. I need in my mind try to figure out the people around me, the people in the community here, which I have such differences with, that I need to embrace them for who they are, for who these people are. And that's why this book, I removed myself from this book. Let the voices speak for themselves. There's plenty of things in here which I don't agree with. It's plenty on both ends of the aisle. This is not my book. This is the Rebbe's book. This is the accepting these people for who they were, the same way the Rebbe accepted them and embraced these people. And
Wow.
it was very difficult for me, but it's on many pages over here. Ideas that I don't agree with, and many other people may not in the book may not agree with the other person. I'm hoping that everyone could embrace these ideas that may be so different to them, the way they saw the Rebbe, the way they have a relationship with the Rebbe today. We should all embrace, their ideas as a person. I'm not telling you to accept them. We don't have to accept everything they say, but it's accept the people for who they are.
The essence, the neshama, the way
There's
the Rebbe said.
but like accepting the things that we could sit across from them and speak to them. Sit across from a person who's so different than us and embrace them. And people who I interact with are so different than me. I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to teach myself constantly. It's a constant struggle. I'm looking at one thing I can walk away with is to embrace and to accept and to slowly integrate our minds, even people who are very, very different to us, people who attacked us, people who, you know what I mean, and whichever level, as hard as it may be.
Wow. Who's the target market for this book? Is this for Chabad? Is this for secular audiences? Like, who are you trying to touch?
I always say that, like my, the book is written that everyone can understand it, but there's always everyone can appreciate it and enjoy it, and everyone can learn something new from it. So the language is, for every single person to accept. And, this book may be a little bit more because we're involved with, Redux on the publisher and the editors, Sarah Ogans and Julian Anderson, who basically pushed the book to be as palpable to every single person, just to be able to pick it up, even non-Jewish, and to appreciate it. And sifting through, to me, every single story, every single detail is interesting, but they have a much broader knowledge. Julian Anderson has a much broader knowledge of what is she could, accept, and she could, understand that world much better than, much better than I can understand what will be appreciated. And she guided a lot of the book, the way it's written, and the way it's portrayed, to really understand for everyone.
I mean, I also think, doing promotion, like people over the years will say, oh, how many Lubavitch are there, and, they're thinking, oh, guys in black hats. And when you think of Chabad, it's the people they touch. So, if it's, Chabad house embracing through lectures or sharing it, it's like, the audience will be, it's not just meant for Crown Heights. I mean, it's meant, and that's not, the Rebbe, what, on the 10th anniversary of the Rebbe's passing, the New York Times did another story 10 years after, the whole thing of, the whole exploring the Rebbe didn't leave a predecessor. There wasn't a predecessor. And one of the things I stressed when I was given that assignment is Chabad's not about Crown Heights. Like, you're not getting it. And I don't think that story was effective in that way. And maybe that's above my pay scale, but I think this book will reach in many ways to a much broader audience, because when you go to Chabad in Arkansas or Chabad in Manhattan, those are not people with black hats. That's not what the Chabad movement's about. So I think it will, in different lanes, get to different groups of people. And I think, like, it's not just this, as Newt Gingrich is clearly not Jewish, or John Lewis, may he rest in peace. It's important for the non-Jewish world, because the Rebbe, had an influence, and we know the stories of, police officers coming on Dollar Day, and many mayors and other elected officials who weren't Jewish. And still to this day, you have people like Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey. So I'm hoping that it's, yeah, it's not meant for, what people
For
think
everyone.
Chabad is. Yeah, it's for
Right,
everyone. Yeah.
right. It's interesting, Rebbe Zaklikowski, because a lot of your emphasis has been on the Rebbe's love and accepting of all different types of people and on his Hasidim. Do you feel like it also captures back the love of the Jew and of the Chassid to the Rebbe?
Yeah, I mean that's what I was saying, that I was trying to understand that love. But I think that the acceptance, that's a part of my thesis in my essay, that love came because of a reason, of something that the Rebbe was giving them. It happened both together. Hadassah Kabbalah, who's in the book, um, who was the Rebbe's second cousin.
How's she the Rebbe's second cousin?
Her father is her father and Rebbe Levi are first cousins. Is Schneerson's. I'm Rabbi Zalman Schneerson. So I was working on I'm working on her on the autobiography with her, and we spoke specifically about this question, she had her own fears with the Rebbe from childhood. The Rebbe asked her a very difficult mathematical question. She never went to school, and sort of she came to the house to the Rebbe and to the Rebbetzin, to visit very often, but usually the Rebbe wasn't there. But I tried to ask her, how did that relationship, what was that? She's like, it couldn't have happened both ways. It couldn't have happened either way. She was here from 1950, from even earlier, and she saw it all happening very, very up close. That it couldn't have happened. There was love from the Rebbe, but the Chassidim had to be there, and the Chassidim had to show love back. And there's
Wow.
many factors and ways of that happening, and how that developed inspired him. It didn't happen in one day. Ultimately, love came from the Chassidim in extreme ways because of the way the Rebbe treated them. Not to sit alone all day, but he basically gave up his life to sit and speak to people. I deduced from a very long correspondence of someone I had Yichidus, and I was organized, a personal audience with the Rebbe, basically of the Rebbe sitting there and discussing, things that me and you would sit around the table, bullshopping with, and as if he had all the time in the world. It's mind-boggling for someone, who wasn't necessarily inclined to do that. But many people are not inclined to do that. And I know that from this neighborhood, from people, they cut conversations so short. You know what I mean? Okay, thank you so much. Have a good day. And there's many people around you that we could all think about who are like that. But here the Rebbe was sitting and having full sessions and listening to what they had to say, and maybe interjecting, with 2 or 3 lines. He's to get someone from the outside world to sit and write that down on a piece of paper, and then for me to find it, you know what I mean, and then to go through it, some 150 letters of going back and forth about his audience, with the person who was organizing it, is fascinating. Just to give us understanding of who the Rebbe was, corresponding with. And this person, the Rebbe wasn't doing this because he wanted to gain something. So this person was alone in this world. He never got married, never had kids. We know nothing about him today. Nothing. There's no family to even speak to him about it. Nothing. We don't know. He's not in Chabad. He never was Chabad. He never did anything for Chabad, and he never did anything to add to anyone in Yiddishkeit. It's very clear from letters. He changed his own life to a certain degree, right? Not 100%, but that's all. The Rebbe didn't. The Rebbe gave himself to people. He became the
Wow.
man of the person.
So
What
one
would be
thing
your
that,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, one thing that Dovid said is that, he was talking about the Hasidim, it took time. I mean, if you think when the Rebbe first started the mitzvah campaign, and, he was hitting the streets of New York, I mean, Jews were horrified. In the world that I came, horrified that someone would stop you in the street and say you're Jewish. And you look at, here in 2024, it's, like that's not the vibe on the street. And like Chabad is the fastest growing Jewish institution in America. So it took time. And I think what Dovid said is if he hadn't put that out there, that love and that unconditional love, and he wouldn't have gotten that back, because Jews in my world were not used to that, and and Jews in, whatever, if you were conservative or whatever, and as the Rebbe said, that I had to learn, like, there's no such thing as a Reformed Jew, a conservative Jew. You're a Jew,
You're a Jew. You're a Jew.
right? And I think, like, listen, the Rebbe is not just an individual, and what the Rebbe did was create a movement. From the moments he touched people individually, and those are moments, and those are a lot, in those stories, there's people's moments and how they were changed or inspired or maybe disagreed, but still inspired by the Rebbe. But 30 years later, and when we'll look back, I mean, I won't be here, and I'm not sure where I'm going, but what's important is it'll be the Rebbe created a movement, and very few people in the history of this world will be remembered for creating movements. And the Rebbe not only changed the trajectory in our country, but he changed the trajectory of Jewry around the world. And that is on another level. So when you think about, you asked originally the oracle, I would think like that sort of connects to this mentor, to the spiritual leader. That's, I think, a perfect title.
Right. And that's what Rebbe evokes: mentor, guide.
Right. And, for Dovid, he has for me, it's again beyond my pay scale. I'm not sure if the Rebbe had a direct connection to Hashem, and that's not for me. I'm not interested in that, to be honest. Like, I've not studied Torah, and that's not my interest. What's my interest is he brought me back, and I felt loved by other Jews. I love putting tefillin on with a fellow Jew anywhere publicly in the street, and especially at this time in what we're going through with our brothers and sisters in Israel. And I don't agree with everything about the Rebbe and what he believed in how to bring peace. And that's okay. I'm a critical thinker, and I live in a free society, and I think the Rebbe understood that. And the Rebbe would have never said, "Oh, you're a self-hating Jew, Mark, because you don't agree with me." And everywhere in the world, from side, he's on, Chabad's on every continent. If it's in a big population, if it's a small population, and that's a movement. That's pretty. And he didn't do it in 3 lifetimes. He did it in a short period of life. And again, as an immigrant, someone who was displaced, who came to a new country, that's an oracle.
Yeah, yeah. Rabbi Zaklikowski, I'm curious, from your work and the interviews on people's connection to the Rebbe, or if I could use the Hebrew word, hiskashrus, connection, what would you say, based on all your interviews and your work, to the next generation, to teenagers, to people born after 1994? I work in Beis Rivka in Chabad Girls High School, so I think education. How would you impart this love for the Rebbe, this connection to the Rebbe, this passion, this mission?
I can't tell people, what to, how to do and how to connect. What I could tell is, my generation and the generation, that's before me, that we need to start speaking about whys, not just what, but why. What inspires us? Why do we feel connected? What's going through us? What's our struggles? How do we overcome them? And speak about it. Speak about it to our kids. Tell them the stories of your life. It's hard and difficult. for me to pull words out of people's mouths and their emotions and feelings. But it's so much more tragic when I sit and speaking to their kids and grandchildren. They tell me, he never told this to us. He never shared his motives, his motivations, his dedication. He never shared why. And that's the problem. That to me is raising a generation of people who don't feel the connection because we don't describe our connection. The Rebbe said that, explained that when we're sitting here and I'm sitting here, we have to be a dugma chai, we have to be an example for the next generation. So like I go to shul every morning, my kids are sleeping, right? They don't know that I'm sitting here, learning on the couch. They don't know the stuff I gave. So how does that help? Being a dugma chaya. Dugma chaya is that we're speaking about what's going through us. Why did I go early to shul? What did I do there? Who did I give money to? Why did I give that specific money to that specific person? What are the things that I do to make myself a better person? What's the process? How does it happen? That's the way we're dugma chayas. And my generation didn't do that with me, and I had to seek out for my whole life through my interviews. That's what inspired me originally, to try to understand the whys and wheres and where. So I had to sit in interviews. I always say that I get paid to hear what other people what you don't want to say, and it's sort of sad. Like that's the way I created my life, from from listening to people, from getting their information. Until this day, people don't want to share their stories. But to me, that's the only way we're going to get the next generation, is through the stories, through listening. But I say also one more thing, which is fascinating, that while doing research for my essay, someone we have the Rebbe's answers, teachings, and we're sitting here, look at the Sichas Maimar and Igros Kodesh, hundreds of volumes, and all different kind of interesting ways and parallels of the way I write my books, my Advice for Life series. Constantly studying and reading everything, and then gathering them and making it applicable to people. Learning. I think that for me it was when I started doing my Advice for Life series, it was a question of we have something, but we can't express like what the difference is, of Chabad, because of what the Rebbe taught us. So I, started writing it up in easy language to be able for everyone to understand it, and try to see what's unique about us, to try to implement it, into our lives. Basically landed, from at weddings, people give out shirts and everything. Mementos, which I love, and get piled and read them as soon as I possibly can get my hand onto one. If it's PDF, I print it out. I don't like reading on the computer so much.
Did I share with you the one for my son's bar mitzvah? I gave it to you? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I had a printed copy too, but not because I was there. So I basically all of a sudden landed, like, this guy just printed hundreds of answers that we learned something that we knew, but I didn't realize the extent of it, which these answers would never be printed in the volumes of Igros Kodesh. Mostly the answers are different. But over here, the answer was over and over and over. Ask a lawyer, ask a doctor, ask a rabbi, ask a professional, ask a rabbi in this field, ask a doctor in that field, speak to two people, speak to the local activists. What's going on over here? What's that supposed to mean? So Rebbe wasn't trying to control his chassidim. He wasn't. He wanted us to think for ourselves and to do ourselves. We have to learn, to try to understand and speak to people, make our decisions by ourselves, coming from ourselves. We're not going to the next person, but finding it in ourselves, not being true to ourselves, being true to who we are, trying to understand. We're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. Like I said, next time, it's okay. Whatever the people around you say, you are who you are, and you're special, and it's totally okay for you to make mistakes, blunders. You know what I mean? I say people, there are mistakes in my books that, the mistakes are for certain types of people. and that's okay. Like I make mistakes all the time, and I try to understand and constantly more understanding. And I understand more today than I understood yesterday or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, and try to constantly learn and never end my learning. I'm never going to say that this is where I'm holding. I'm just going to go learn more and more and delve into it more and more and more. We have this amazing app by Rebbe Drive. We get the letters from the Rebbe in English. It's like it's mind-boggling. On any topic we want, just sit there and just read every once in a while. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every moment. We take something, we read it. It's at our fingertips like never before. It's just amazing. And our mind could, take in the ideas of being positive, of taking something that seems negative and flipping it into positive. That was truly, the uniqueness of the Rebbe. It wasn't just that some kind of philosophy of thinking positive and it'll be good. It's taking a negative situation and flipping it on its head and seeing it as something positive. That's just never admonishing the person who's writing to him, I did a horrible thing, and they're saying, you're a horrible person, you totally did something wrong. No. We have to learn from it. We have to learn the applicable parts of Shulchan Aruch, whatever it was, but then taking and saying, now you could influence more people with it. This is your lesson. This is how you uplift the next person. It's a fascinating way of looking at life, at challenges, or not even seeing the concept of challenges.
Right. Wow. I do want to say, like, to compliment the students and the girls, it's true that the previous generation has to do whatever they can to give over the whys, but it's fascinating. Mark, you would find it fascinating to see also, when we take the girls on a trip to the Rebbe's Ohel, every single one of them, no matter what type, no matter what stripe, every single one of them sits down and writes a letter to the Rebbe and feels so connected. And it's unbelievable. It's like you see how the Rebbe is still their Rebbe, each and every one of them. They are still connected. He is still their Rebbe. He's still guiding them, through the letters, through the Farbringen, through the learning, through these stories. Like it all comes together. And this is very much present 2024 in these girls' lives. And that's, the way you saw it also. There are still shluchim going out to the world. We are still alive with our connection to the Rebbe, and it's beautiful and inspiring to see, especially in the younger generation. I still have $1 from the Rebbe. I still have picture, but when I see the students and their real deep appreciation, it's, the Rebbe's here with us. What do you got?
A picture of Besuda from 1992. I just found my sister in there, so there you go.
That's cute. Yeah, memory lane. Okay, any last words or anything you want to leave our listeners with?
Yes, I want to just say that's amazing that I called my essay Rebbe by choice. That was a choice of the people who chose him. It's amazing that people are still making those choices, because today they don't have to make that choice. It's much easier for them to just say no, and that's truly inspiring for people like me, myself.
Yeah, I mean, for me, right, and like my daughters are not going to say it was their Rebbe, but my daughter just recently went to nursing school, and she's very proud that every door has a mezuzah, and she knows that's like a Rebbe thing, and my middle daughter, was talking to her boyfriend, and he was asking her questions, and he knows, like, father, her father wears a hat or a yarmulke now, and she said, oh yeah, my rabbi. And he said, oh, I told you you're religious. You said you have a rabbi. And she said, no, I'm not religious. Dovid's my rabbi. And it's that, and that's the Rebbe. It's that sense of connection. When I was a kid, the memories I had of the rabbi, he was smacking me in the head in Hebrew school because I was talking to a girl. So for me, that legacy of the Rebbe lives, in the world that I'm in, in those ways. Like, And, for my daughter who moved out before her younger sister, she didn't want to put a mezuzah up. And, in the back of my head, instead of like being that overbearing Jewish parent, not my parents, but, a stereotype of the world that I come from with Jewish guilt, in my head, I'm hearing a shluchim say, some just, you never know when, and for me, that's how the Rebbe's alive, not alive physically. I don't want to start a controversy here, but that he's alive in what he thought and believed, that that's in my head, and that someday maybe my daughter will put a mezuzah up, or I have a daughter who's sometimes she's like, yeah, I don't like Lubavitch. I hated Lubavitch as a kid, but I like Chabad. And then when her sisters tell her, genius, it's the same thing, she's like, no, I like Dovid. He's Chabad. Okay. So, but my point there is, like, that's not a daughter who went to university and wanted to go to Chabad. But my daughter lived 3 years in Saudi Arabia, working in Saudi Arabia. And for the expats, she had Passover and Rosh Hashanah, and she did Jewish things in Saudi. And I think that's an influence of the Rebbe. Now, not consciously, because she's not so drawn to the whole thing, but to me, that's how she's embracing her Judaism. And I think I would have been embracing my Judaism that way a long time ago. And I think that is the vibe that's in the air. That vibe's all over the world 30 years later. And people may not know it. I mean, I think at this point, it's such a powerful movement. People don't know where that vibe came from. They don't know, oh, that's this guy, the Rebbe. Now all of a sudden in Siberia or in Guatemala or in Cuba, that vibe's in the air because of the shluchim, and even more indirectly. That's an incredible legacy. I mean, as we celebrate this incredible man, like, wow, 30 years later, that vibe's all over. That's a pretty incredible legacy, and it's not going anywhere. It's just consistently gets stronger. And you're living in the world. People said, oh, the Rebbe died, no predecessor. It was done. Like, that was everywhere, in
Yeah,
the
I
secular.
remember hearing that they prepared suicide bags. They thought there would be mass suicide in Chabad. And Baruch
And
Hashem.
listen, right. And listen, I'm sure like, I mean, Dovid said, like, maybe, and listen, the secular world, there are people would more less willing or less able to discuss their inner feelings or inner thoughts, and I think in your community, like as David was saying, but I'm sure when the Rebbe passed, there was doubt, there was insecurity, like, and that's okay, maybe people didn't want to discuss that. But 30 years later, man, this movement, what the Rebbe created, is alive and well, and it's like it's a living and breathing thing, so I'm telling you, like, my daughter's in nursing school, and she met someone, and the young woman said, oh, I'm from Colombia, South America, and like somehow a conversation came up, and she told my daughter, oh, I'm Jewish. Okay, so my daughter Lola's embracing that, and they'll go to the Chabad house, and like, I'm sure the kid is from Colombia. She knows what Chabad is, like, so we should all, with this book that Dovid and I collaborated on, like, I think everyone should be open to it. Don't be afraid if there's something in there you don't. I think what Dovid said is can't be pressed enough. Like, if there's something in there you don't agree with, And this is the second interview where in my essay I talk about movements, and like, don't get so insecure that I compared it to the women's rights movement. It's like, if you know anything about women's, rights, the Rebbe embraced Chabad women are strong, and I've met many Chabad women that I would say are feminist, and I'm like, oh my God, you said Chabad and feminist. Yeah, like Chabad women have the best of everything, they have beautiful family and all that, and they're powerful people in the workplace, or they have a they're not in a lane that most people think. And I think that's also something, the legacy of the Rebbe, and I think it's important to discuss that, is that, I photographed in Moscow a doctor who worked for Chabad, in one of the, sort of infirmary hospitals that Chabad runs. And she was originally she's, I think, identified as Satmar, and she had 5 kids, and she was a pediatrician. And I told her I thought she was an incredible feminist, and she almost crashed the car saying she's not a feminist. But if you look at the real understanding of a feminist, like, the women didn't get there without the Rebbe's vision.
The Rebbe actually also looks at it in a messianic way. It is said that in the times of the future redemption, the female, what you might see during exile times as the masculine having more power, in the messianic era, the female energy will rise. And this is just heraldic, this is just a sign of the messianic era, which is really.
Listen, everyone knows when you visit Chabad houses all over the world, it's the Rebbitzin, really the one running it, who's the glue, and that's
Right,
just the power.
which is amazing. The way the Rebbe saw Mashiach and the world that the Rebbe envisioned, he literally is making it happen by sending shluchim, by getting Jews to be in touch with their soul, or their, the way you were talking about Jewish pride. Like, he saw the world, he saw it as so doable. Like, we could make this happen. We could make the entire world in touch with something deeper, which is what, the Messianic era really is, that everyone's aware of a creator, of God, in touch with, touch with. Did you want to say something else, Rabbi Zaklikowski?
I just really, because I was just speaking to, because Rabbi Kotlarski is not feeling well, very, very sick right now. So I just wanted to wish him for Shlema. He really opened up to us for this book for the first time, and still moving along. And I've sat with him for 20 hours of interviewing, and Mark, we took pictures of him at a wedding for many hours, spending time with him, and truly pushing himself to the utmost extent. So for me, it's just to wish him they should be well, for many years, to helping people who, even, all around the world, and everything that he always does. That's just something that, as I was looking at pictures. Mark.
Okay.
I would also like to thank Rabbi Krinsky, because from the moment I went into 770 and Zalman Shmutkin, they made without them, and I know the Rebbe, I'm sure, was the guy overseeing everything, but, and all these years later, Rabbi Krinsky has always made me feel welcome, and I felt always loved by Rabbi Krinsky, and I'll forever cherish that.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Where can they purchase the book? Where can everyone get it?
I guess you go to Rebbe Schneerson.com. It's just REBBESCH, and the Rebbe's name, or Hasidicarchives.com. Or you can just do a search for the Oracle Rebbe Asnin on Google, and it should come up.
Thank you, everyone, for joining and watching. Thank you so much for your time, Rabbi and Mrs. Zaklikowski and Mark. Thank you.